From an urban shithole to an outdoor, beautiful wildlife landscape near you, this is Tales from Weimerica's Hot Mic, Episode 11. We're going to start off with something a little different this week. We're going to start off with an experience that I just got back from. Some of you might have noticed that there wasn't a new episode last week. And that was for two reasons. Number one, I had just got back from a week-long trip away from the shit around here and out towards the Pacific Northwest. And also because I had copped another flag on my YouTube channel. We don't usually talk about any positive things on this channel outside of the salvation we can find in Christ and the communities that we can foster with friends and like-minded white people. But I wanted to do that this week. I wanted to, for lack of a better words, give you guys a white pill. I'm not one to be a fan of the whole pill talk, black pill, white pill, red pill, blue pill, out of just the fact that the idea was created by two transsexuals who had made the Matrix movies. But, for lack of a better words, because you guys understand the terminology better than any other word, here's a white pill for you. So I just got back from a trip to the Pacific Northwest, and I was surprised to see what a difference there is out there. Now I'm talking nature, people, crime, mindset, zeitgeist even. It's very different than out in the Northeast where I'm broadcasting from. The first thing you notice when you get off the plane is just how white everyone still is. And of course, along with the white skins that you'll come across when you step off the plane, you'll also notice how clean it is out there. It doesn't smell. Everything is the right color in terms of the water. The water is clear and blue. The sky is blue, the trees are green, it's not over-deforested. It's very beautiful, actually. And for those of you who had grown up out here, or maybe on the other coast, you'll see things that you wouldn't think were even possible in the year of our Lord, 2022. When I was driving down the road, I had seen, of all things, and those of you from either the East Coast and maybe the West Coast, I haven't really been out in that direction too much in my lifetime, but you'll be surprised when you see things like, for example, driving down the road, you'll see a white girl by herself walking down the side of the street. She's not on drugs, she looks pretty, she's in a dress. It was very, very surprising because you guys know just as much as I do that if you did this shit back at home, it's a one-way ticket to getting picked up and being raped. After I'd went into the grocery store and looked around and had a very pleasant exchange with the person who was at the cash register, I had walked outside and in the parking lot, another thing you would never see. A little white boy, no older than 9 or 10 years old, walks out from the front doors, across the parking lot, he's in a bathing suit. He walks to his parents' car by himself. Nobody else there. Same thing as the white girl walking by herself. If this kid was doing this up in the Northeast, it's a very, very real possibility he would have been snatched up. This is what they don't want you to know. There still exists areas out there where you can raise your kids in a healthy environment like this. Those of you guys like myself who weren't raised in these environments, who didn't even know that this stuff still existed, it came as a little bit of a culture shock, I must say. More importantly, it told me that there's somewhere else we can go where we don't have to fight only over scraps. A very big problem that a lot of people talked about between 2016 and now, if you're paying attention, you damn well better be talking about this, is that we have to bring our kids into a world that's very hostile to them. And if you're within the borders of the great Satan, into a country that is not just rigged against them, but purpose-built for the destruction of them and their people. To make sure that at every turn, whether they be in public school or even homeschooled, when they go outside or on their iPhone, or if you're stupid enough to give your little kids iPhones, that they are indoctrinated at every turn, that every facet of society is for the purpose of indoctrinating them into being sodomites to destroy their soul, and indoctrinating them not to have kids or do whatever to destroy their blood. That's not to say that these places out in the Pacific Northwest don't have their problems. You know, you do see a lot of leftism out there too. And in Idaho, not that long ago, for those of you guys who have a memory longer than a goldfish, which is, if that's the case, that's very good. You have a better memory than the average American. You guys will remember that Patriot Front went out there into this small little town in Idaho and were arrested for doing nothing but standing against sodomy. Tyler Dinsmore, Pacific Northwest, same thing, spoke the Bible truth, as I've said time and time again, and was thrown in prison with hate crime charges, and they're trying to do everything they can to destroy his life. Now, I did see something else on that same topic that really surprised me. As I was driving through a town, I had seen 3 guys, white, of course. What else would they be out there? I think the entire trip, I had been there for 8 days, I had seen maybe 2 black people and an Indian, which is crazy because they don't exist out east either. But I had seen 3 white guys standing on a street corner, holding a sign that said, "White Lives Matter." Now, that is fantastic. Openly advocating for your blood, for your race, not giving a shit what anyone else has to say. If you did that out here in Zog territory, firmly within it, you would be crucified. Whether that means in the legal system, you would have your entire life ruined, or on that street corner, you'd get a drive-by done on you. It's one or the other. But what that tells me is there does exist some measure of a different zeitgeist out there. Whether or not there is the same threat of being done in for advocating for your own people, there exists enough of a confidence in their communities that they can go out and advocate for their own blood without being killed or having their lives ruined. They have a confidence in them. Now, this confidence is not misplaced. Out here, to do such a thing openly would be courageous, perhaps even a little bit foolish. Because there's not much you would accomplish out here. You get your entire life, everything you've worked for, totally done in. But the thing is, you wouldn't get anything out of it. I very much advocate for having something you're willing to die for. Of course, you need that. If you don't have something you're willing to die for, you have no reason to live. But don't throw your life away for nothing. If you can get an image in your head of a hill in a war, a battle, would you be willing to sacrifice 100 men to take that hill, which is maybe 5 feet away? Is it worth it? How many lives is it worth to get that hill? Now out here throwing your entire life away to convince nobody, it's not worth it. Because there's no confidence. I have no confidence that if I go outside and do that, I'm going to accomplish anything. But what I learned is, out there in the Pacific Northwest, you can accomplish something. These people have the confidence that there are enough people out there in this territory, and they'll be receptive enough to see it, that they will accomplish something. And I think that really says something about the area. Listeners, I do believe that white children are worth it. The investment to go out there into an area, a territory, where they are not going to be harangued by brown skins and Jews to ruin them, at least around them, environmentally. Out here, if you raise kids, you have to fight for the very little tiniest scraps to get them some kind of good childhood to raise them up in today's modern day and age out here on the East Coast. Probably on the West Coast too. If People v. Preds and the other pedophile catchers are any proof on the West Coast, it's worse there than it is out here. But I do think that your white children are worth it, the investment, to pick up your life and go somewhere where there are other white people, where they can be raised around their own tribe and have a safe environment to grow up in. Where you don't have to worry that if they lose your hand in the grocery store, that some guy's going to come by and swipe them up off their feet and rape them for the rest of their lives in some dungeon. Where you don't have to worry. Where you don't have to worry that if there's some situation where your daughter has to walk home and she's not some 400-pound tatted out heroin addict, that she won't be swept up and raped. Your children deserve it. And there is still hope. There's another option out there. It exists. For how long? I don't know. The specific area I was in has seen 70,000 people moving in from California. Most of them white, but with them, not far behind, will be their politics, their beliefs, and their zeitgeist, for lack of a better word, too. To bring in Somalians and Mexicans to get a so-called better life that they and their ancestors had never worked for. To shoehorn in outsiders into a life that isn't within their blood, within their system, within their brain, within their spirit. And of course, in doing so, ruining the remnant, the last very little tiny good bit of America in the process. Now, of course, There is one little thing that I would have liked to see out there more of, and that's to see more Orthodox churches, but I digress. But that's a topic for a different time. So, to sum it all up, in the words of the now deceased Harold Covington, come home, white man, because you do have a home. You don't have to be forced to live in the shit, the mud, with the dogs. You have an option. Go and take it while it's still there. Raise your kids there. There's a saying among Christians, especially among the Orthodox and other denominations where people still have big families. The fastest and most efficient ways to make converts, to make Christians, is to have children. It's a whole lot easier to have children and raise them in the faith, to have unshakable foundations in their heart, to believe these things to their innermost being, than it is, of course, to try to convert someone who has grown up in a different environment. So come home, white man. In your hands, you have the power to secure their existence and to secure their future and to secure their blood. You have the power in your hands. There's not only scraps that we can fight over, but a very, very beautiful area, a very beautiful landscape, free of crime, that you can go there and do what your fathers failed to do. There is another chance. To draw a dichotomy, I'm going to change our gears here and move back into what we're usually doing, which is not looking at the positive, but looking at the negative. As CF used to say, for some of us, the Jesus is your best friend kind of theology is not as effective, not as stirring, not as commanding as the fire and brimstone killing demons type of theology. For some of us, that's what makes us move to become stronger. To draw a dichotomy from what I saw in the Pacific Northwest, a little anecdote. I had just gotten done in the Pacific Northwest with their TSA, which, by the way, once again, the TSA is totally, it wouldn't be a necessity, it wouldn't be something you would even need in a white country, but it's just it's such a very different experience when you're up there. I had moved through the TSA in less than 5 minutes. The guy was polite. When I was pushing stuff through the x-ray machine, it's like you're in a different country. I'd actually told someone when I came back that the state that I was in is not America. It's not the same country. I really, truly believe that too. But when I had come back, I had landed in the city, back in the east, and I swear to God, the moment I stepped off the plane, the smell of shit, feces, in the words of Michael Jackson, doo-doo feces, had hit me in the face like a wave. I was back to the shithole that Zog had created. A once very strong city, mind you, of many, many different Europeans. A diaspora from various countries, various parts of Europe that had created a very, very powerful city. And now, reduced to a smoking crater of diversity, and at the top, the Jews. They had done exactly what they want to do with the rest of the world here. And I had the smell of shit hit me in the face like a wall. It was debilitating. I walk further in after seeing a city full of white people who look healthy, who don't have tattoos, who don't have colored hair, laying all over the ground. Bunch of niggers in the airport. Probably high, strung out, sleeping. Swear to God, you could see a couple flies buzzing around their head, whatever. Continue outside, get my baggage. And what do I see next? The guy that's actually picking us up from the airport is getting yelled at by some homo with a blue beard, and climbing into the back of his SUV is some 16-year-old tranny. By God, I knew I had come back home. Now, of course, that's rhetorical. For the white man, home is where I had come from, and hell is where I'd return to. Jewish hell. As I had said in my old Twitter account, the more Jews that your state, country, town, whatever has, the more it begins to resemble hell. Think about it. If the Jews reject Jesus Christ and there is no way to heaven but through him, as we had read in the book of John, the more Jews you have, the more it begins to resemble hell. And that's exactly where I'd return to. As much as I want to be back to where I had left from, many of us don't live there yet. The white man needs to come home, but a lot of us haven't come home yet. And still, even those who do live up in the Pacific Northwest do face the same kind of cultural social decay that we are facing out here. Because we face it here and because we face it there, let's do what we usually do here on Hot Mic and take a look at what's coming down the cultural pipeline. Here's a story that I've had sitting in my folder at least since Hot Mic episode 8 or 9. I wanted to take a look at it, but I couldn't really figure out how to fit it in. This is something very important, though, and we're seeing more and more of it in the news cycle. Written on June 17th, 2022, from the Washington Examiner, Maryland man charged with hate crimes after groomer painted on libraries. The article goes, a Maryland man has been charged with a hate crime after allegedly spray painting the exterior of 2 public libraries with the word groomer, which officials say they believe was meant to be used as a homophobic slur. Charles Sutherland, 30, was arrested Thursday on charges of vandalism and a hate crime charge. Don't forget that. Of the Greenbelt Branch Library and the New Carlton Branch Library on June 4th and June 9th, respectively. Both buildings were spray painted with the word groomer in giant yellow letters on the outside windows. Something very common to the social decay we see coming out of a certain tribe is the pushing forward of a specific direction, all the while denying you're going towards that direction. But you are, and it's a good thing. This is very archetypical of this group of people because they are racked with schizophrenia and they can have 2 ideas at the same time. They have voices in their head and they want you to listen to the voices, whether you want to or not. The crackdown on the word groomer, while referring to the sodomite community, whatever kind of community that is very interesting because what does it imply? Now, if you tried to attack a certain group of people with an adjective, an idea, or a practice that did not apply to them, there wouldn't be any confusion. If you had went outside of a mosque and spray painted on the wall, pork eater, would that make any sense? No. Would you be charged with a hate crime? Certainly not. Now, of course, a hate crime is nothing more than a bludgeon used to enforce the ideology of being anti-white. So, if we're trying to keep some kind of consistency in a line of thought, there's nothing shameful, there's nothing harmful in trying to apply an adjective to a group of people where it doesn't work. It doesn't mean anything. If you call the Muslim a pork eater, it doesn't mean anything. It's nothing. But for some reason, they are taking offense at calling homosexuals groomers, pedophiles, pederasts, people who groom children into this lifestyle. Many of you should know by now that there is an extreme overlap between NAMBLA and other pedophile advocacy groups and the early sodomite platforms. When sodomy had first really entered American culture in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s through both the old Frankfurt School Jews and people like Alfred Kinsey here stateside, you'll know that there was a significant overlap between Kinsey advocating for sodomy and his ties with pedophiles. There is a correlation between sodomy and pedophilia. In fact, it is more or less the same thing. Magnus Hirschfeld, as I've said many times, who was a proponent of transsexualism, he had invented it, and a proponent of sodomy, was also the one who had created the term ebophile. If you've ever seen it online, and I know you have if you people have crawled across Twitter, you've seen people say, that's not a pedophile, it's an ebophile, it's normal, That word was invented by Magnus Hirschfeld, who had said that it was healthy for development for a young boy to be in a relationship sexually with an adult man. This shit absolutely goes all the way back. And they're brothers. These 2 ideas are brothers. If the accusation of groomer against groups of sodomites had no ground, this man, Charles Sutherland, would have been charged only with vandalism. But because there is some kind of correlation, that's why they're charging him with a hate crime. They want to put as much distance as possible between those who care about children who would shout out against this, with sodomites going into these little libraries with these little 3-year-olds and their stupid parents who bring them in, and reading books on all manners of sodomy. One of the greatest revolutionary acts here in Weimerica is telling the truth about something, calling things by their correct name. You've heard it said before, call a demon what he is and he will begin to flail. Put your thumb on him and he will begin to freak out, harder than you've ever seen him do before. What these sodomites are doing are coming in and teaching children about sexual things. When I use that word, I use it strictly in the modern sense. There is nothing sexual about sodomy. Think about this. What is sex used for? It's used for reproduction. The sexual organs are in the creation of new offspring. What offspring is there to have out of the anus, out of places where waste come from? The only offspring you get are new strands of AIDS, new strains of diseases to turn your sexual organs into pus-oozing stumps. That's it. These sodomites come in hypersexualized outfits. They're teaching all manners of sodomy to children who by all accounts are under the legal age of consent, teaching them about things that have only to do with sexual organs and places where waste comes from. They are, by definition, grooming these children into sexual things, sodomitic things. And they don't want you to call them out, because the minute you call them out, people will begin to lift their ears and eyes up. Assuming that there are some people out there who have some sense of life left in them, which out here there's not much. Right underneath the part that I had read in the article, the guy who wrote it continues. The term groomer refers to someone who creates and maintains a relationship with a young child so that they can manipulate, exploit, and abuse them. What else is it? They want to label these things every other thing except what they truly are, because telling truth is one of the most revolutionary things you can do in a world that's controlled by Jesus Christ's killers. It's that simple. Jesus Christ laid it out very plainly for us. If he is the way, the truth, and the life, what are his enemies? If he stands for all these things, what do they stand for? They are the foot trap, the lie, and death. That's what they are. They are the trap for your feet, the lie, and death. Tell the truth, and you will be at enmity with them. To wrap things up, a little housekeeping. I have been getting some requests from some people who are listeners of the show to create another avenue for you guys to listen to my stuff. So I will be looking into creating a channel on Odyssey. Chances are you might even be listening to this episode on Odyssey. So that will create 3 places you can find my content. That will be YouTube, Vidly, and Odyssey. I'm also going to ask my listeners to continue to request that other content creators make more content, that they continue in the fight against the untruth, the lie, and death, that being mainly to go ask Rick from Rome is Burning to continue to make a show, and to go and check out Horrified Onlookers content here on YouTube as well. He runs a show called Long Way Down. He has a couple documentaries about some of the social decay we've seen. Very good stuff. Sometimes I make an appearance on his shows. Go over to him and ask him to continue doing stuff. Same thing with Rick from Rome is Burning. In 2 places, in both online and in your own friend circles, make sure you're fostering community with these people, man. We're fighting a war and our enemy is united wholly against us. The least we could do is try to create some sense of camaraderie and fraternity and brotherhood with the people who we're supposed to be fighting this war with, against those who want to destroy us. This has been Tales from Weimerica's Hot Mic, episode 11. Hail Christ, hail victory. Thank you for listening.